I'm your host, Scott, Dr. Jakes Goldfine, welcoming you to another episode of Where'd You Get Your Funk From? Shout out to PTFI for the funky theme music. For this episode, I'm delighted to welcome musician and host of the long-running A Funk Above the Rust radio show, Denver Skip Reeves, a.k.a. the Funktologist. Starting out as a drummer in the 1970s, he worked with artists like the Marvelettes, Mitch Ryder, the Platters, the Coasters, Buddy Miles, Alphonse, Mouzon, and the Drifters. In addition to providing a platform for popular and lesser-known funk and soul music, A Funk Above the Rest has featured interviews with Otis Williams of the Temptations, Teena Marie, Rare Earth's Peter Rivera, Four Tops Abdul Duke Fakir, Jeffrey Osborne, Emilio Castillo of Tower of Power, Jimmy Castor, Klymaxx's Cheryl Cooley, comedian Sinbad, ex-Michael Jackson guitarist Jennifer Batten, and Mother's Finest. Reeves' distinguished career includes several other media projects, many of which continue today. Skip, thank you for being here. How are you?
All right, I'm good. How are you?
Doing excellent. So you're coming to us from Denver today, but a little different scenario. You're at the airport, right?
Yes, I am.
All right. Well, we appreciate you carving out the time and joining us today for sure.
Yeah, I'm actually sitting in the pilot's lounge here at the airport.
Oh, ever try flying?
No. It's just a nice room to hang out in.
Yeah. I don't know if they make planes like to accommodate, a frame your size for a pilot.
Yeah, we'll never know.
It was like Kareem Jabbar in Airplane, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I'm always getting either first class or the exit row.
Well, hopefully there's some advantages to that.
Yeah, there is.
Great to finally connect. We've, I guess, done some admiring from afar as brothers in funk, and, great to have you on the show. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you as well.
So the new format, the new show, my old show, Truth and Rhythm, was a little different. This show, the first question is the title. Where'd you get your funk from? And there's two parts to it, Skip. The first is, where'd you get your funk initially? What first drew you to funk? And the second part of it is, how has that funk influence kind of informed who you are?
You know what, like so many others, my major influence to funk obviously was James Brown. As a little kid growing up, of course, my parents were very social people. They were always having gatherings. And of course, in those days, as well as I'm sure today, when all the families would get together. See, my father was a military man. So being in the military, we traveled a lot. I actually lived in Germany for 6 years of my youth. And basically, when my parents would have all their gatherings, all this R&B music was being played. Of course, some of James Brown's earlier stuff that was not funk, I enjoyed it. I just enjoyed his music. But once he kicked over into the funk thing, man, I thought, yeah, this this is the music here. This is the music here. So my beginnings with funk is with James Brown. And, to answer the second part of that question, funk has definitely had a major impact on me, on my life in general, because since funk music, for the most part, is full of energy, I'm an energetic person. My mother was an energetic person. So I've needed funk as an outlet to give me a place to spend that energy. So as a little kid, I grew up dancing and singing and carrying on. Uh, Eventually became a musician. I played several musicians, excuse me, I played several instruments before I finally landed on the drums. I started off with the accordion when I was a little kid in Germany. From there, I went to the piano. My mother was a piano player, and she tried to teach me that when I was about 9 years old. But for some reason, I could never get the hang of playing with two hands. And so as the 60s, progressed, I got into some of the rock and roll stuff. So I started playing guitar. And then in my middle teens, I switched over to the drums, and that ended up being a natural comfortable instrument for me to play.
Wow. You have range. I had no idea. So you were playing accordion. Did you play any polkas? Because I'm thinking you go from polkas to funk.
Yeah, I did. As I did play polkas because
Wow.
I heard a lot of that when I was in Germany as a kid. And yeah, people can find that hard to believe with a name like Funktologist now. But yeah, I played polkas when I was a little kid. But Scott, what you have to kind of keep in mind though, in the 60s, which is when I was living in Germany, you heard all the various types of music on one radio station. So, you know, you could hear James Brown and the Beatles and Mitch Ryder and the Hermits and the Supremes and the Dave Clark Five, the Animals, you know, the Temptations. You heard everybody on the same station. So that's what basically introduced me to the various types of music. And as a result, I've really got a little bit of all of that in me.
And what was the first concert you went to where the performer just really kind of wowed you, made a big impression?
You know what? The first concert that I ever went to, I was in Germany, and it was the Hermits and Steppenwolf. I was 10 years old, and my father, you know, I asked him to take me because my parents were very musically oriented people, and they certainly saw that I too had developed a strong interest in music. So the Hermits and Steppenwolf came over to the NCO club over there, and my father took me. So, of course, if you're familiar with the Hermits, all of these, you know, nice harmonies and soft music that they perform. But when Steppenwolf came on and John McCabe, keep in mind again, I'm a 10-year-old kid, and he kind of scared me at first because he came on stage with this all black leather, you know, suit on. He had on these dark shades, and he got on the microphone in this deep, growly voice. And when he first started talking, I kind of backed up for a second, but my father was right behind me. So once I felt my father, I was like, okay. And from that point on, I enjoyed the show. Of course, you know, at that time, Magic Carpet Ride was a big hit of theirs, which I absolutely liked the song. So yeah, from that point on, I was okay. So Steppenwolf, for the most part, first concert that I saw that had an impact on
Mm, yeah, Born to Be Wild and all those
me. Yeah,
tracks.
the
And
Pusher Man.
yeah, Hermits, the only one I can think of is Henry VIII, as I remember that one.
Yeah, and I think they do Mrs. Robinson, I think is a song they've got. Mrs. Robinson, you got a lovely daughter, something like that.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so then as your musical tastes developed, who were, you mentioned James Brown, but who are a few of your favorite or most inspiring acts, would you say?
Oh, uh, you know, after James Brown, believe it or not, he doesn't get a lot of recognition, but Dyke and the Blazers had a big impact on me for the short period of time of his recording career. Big impact on me. Of course, Sly and the Family Stone, big impact. And you know, I can't deny it. Funkadelic at first, we know they became Parliament Funkadelic later on, but in the early 1970s, Funkadelic, you know, came to Denver. Matter of fact, they were doing a tour with Rare Earth. So I saw Rare Earth and Funkadelic on the same show. And man, you talk about a concert. So from the time I saw Eddie Hazel, who became my favorite guitar player after seeing that show, and he's still my favorite guitar player even to this day, but watching Funkadelic and Eddie Hazel perform, I was just like, you know, I was a young kid and I was just blown away. So those groups I just mentioned had a big impact on me. But, you know, I liked all this stuff. I mean, all the stuff coming out of Motown, the stuff coming out of Stax, big influence on me. On the rock side of things, I mean, I liked a lot of groups, but to tell you the truth, the biggest rock band that had an impact on me was Grand Funk Railroad. I was I just fell in love with that band like you couldn't believe. As a matter of fact, their drummer, Don Brewer, was a, was a quiet influence why I decided to pursue drumming. Because the first Grand Funk concert that I went to, watching him play was like, whoa, the power that he played with, and he was just tight. And, so the rock band Grand Funk, big influence on me, big influence. And, but, all the popular music, I enjoyed it all. But those groups that I just mentioned probably had the biggest impact on me.
I would love to have heard Funkadelic playing Denver back then. I know there's a bootleg out, the Rocky Mountain Shakedown, which is a few years later in the 70s, which is really good. So,
Yeah. Well, that
uh,
particular night, Scott, let me say this. Of course, the leader, George Clinton. Uh, I had like, I think, second row seats at that particular show. And I don't know how many cities George and Funkadelic actually did this, but when it was time for Funkadelic to perform, the band was on stage, and all of a sudden behind me, I heard this ruckus starting to develop, and people were starting to back away, and girls were screaming, and I thought, what in the world is going on? And I turned around and looked behind me, and George Clinton had this tight red bodysuit on, and he was slithering through the crowd as if he was a snake or something. And he was even flicking his tongue out like a snake. And I guess it scared some people, especially a lot of women. But he made his way to the stage, moving like that. You know what? And I just sat there and thought, man, you know, entertainment. That's what music is about, is entertainment. So I thought I just mentioned that. I don't know how often he did that, but he sure did it at the Denver show, and it certainly added to the magnitude of the show.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I thought maybe you were going to say he came out naked with a sheet because I've heard that too, back then. Yeah.
No, he
Uh,
didn't do that at the Denver show that I was at.
so when you gravitated to drums, Skip, who was the first sort of name act that you played with, and what did that feel like for you?
Uh, the first major acts that I played with was the combination of the Drifters, Platters. No, excuse me, I take it back. Alphonse Mouzon was the first major act that I played with. And if there's time, Scott, I'd like to quickly tell that story. In 1974, Alphonse Mouzon had a release out called Mind Transplant. And of course, Tommy Bolin is also playing guitar on it. And the title track to the album, Mind Transplant, it just blew me away. The drumming just blew me away. A lot of fills and fast fills and stuff. And at the time, as a teenager, I really couldn't play that stuff, But I thought, man, this is something really to work on, see if you can play like this. So I became a friend of Alphonse Mouzon because of that particular album. Well, some years later, I was always looking for, new music of his. And there was a period where there was no music of his. And I thought, man, I wonder what happened to Alphonse. And so all of a sudden, I was at the, store, and I see a magazine, and I'm flipping through it, and it showed a picture of Alphonse Mouzon and his record label, Tenacious Records, and a new release. And I thought, wow, he's got some new music out. And this was in the early 90s. And so what happened was I bought the magazine and I took it home, and the record label address, I wrote to it. And I basically said, Alphonse, I've been a fan of yours for a long time, and it's good to see that you're back, and so on and so forth. But I said, I had an album of yours called Mind Transplant, but it got stolen from me. And I said, is there any possible way that I can, retrieve a copy of that release? Of course, at the time, CDs were out, but I said, I'll take an album version or a CD. If there's any way you can help me get a CD of that song. And this was the letter I wrote to him. Well, Scott, like a lot of times, you try to contact celebrities and You don't expect to hear from him. I didn't expect to hear from him. All of a sudden, one day in the mail, I get a package, and this CD shows up, and guess what it was? Mind transplant from Alphonse Mouzon. And I was like, wow, he sent me a copy of this CD. And then about a week later, I get a phone call, and I pick up the phone and I said, yeah, this is Skip. And he goes, hey, Skip, did you get the CD? This is Alphonse. I'm thinking, this is Alphonse Mouzon. You're calling me? He says, yeah, did you get your CD? I said, yeah, I sure did. So we talked. So what happened, we stayed in touch with each other after that point. And in 1996, they were doing a big jazz uh, festival in a mountain town here. And I knew some of the people who were organizing. I said, you folks need to get Alphonse Mouzon down here and let him be on this jazz festival. And they agreed to do it. So I got a hold of Alphonse and told him about it. And he says, well, Skip, he says, can you put a band together for me? He says, I'll come, but I want you to put a band together for me that I can just use there in Denver. I said, sure, I'll put a band together for you. So I did. So I put the band together. And of course, he says, now, Skip, you know, when I get off the drums and play the keyboards during the show, of course, you know you're going to play drums with me. And I said, sure, sure. So that's when I got to play drums with Alphonse Mouzon. So yes, he was the first major artist I actually got to play with.
Wow. That's a great story. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Alphonse Mouzon, in the late 80s, maybe early 90s, I saw him on a somewhat regular basis perform for a while because he was playing at a small venue in Santa Monica where I was living called At My Place on Wilshire Boulevard. And
Mm-hmm.
went up and spoke to him a few times on the set breaks and afterwards. And he was such a nice, relaxed guy, you know?
Yeah, he was. He was very, very nice. And you know, I learned a lot not only from watching him drum, because the song Mind Transplant, you know, it's got this really nice groove to it with a lot of ghost notes on the snare. And so, you know, of course, that album came out in 1974, but here it is, 1996, when I finally get to meet him and interact with him in person. So I'm teasing with him. I said, Alphonse, I said, man, can you still play that groove that's on Mind Transplant? He sat down on the drum and started going, he could still play it. He could still play it. So yeah, he was, you know, kind of he just added to my incentive to keep progressing as a drummer after watching him play and hanging out with him and listening to all of his experiences. And, you know, he made a comment, Scott, that kind of stuck with me throughout my life after that, as far as my musical involvement. He said, Skip, he said, I played music because I love it. He said, I get paid for it. I consider that a bonus. He said, so do it for the love of it. He said, but if you happen to get paid for it, just consider it a bonus. And so I've accepted that philosophy ever since.
Hmm. Yeah. And we lost him too soon, that's for sure.
Yeah, he died of cancer. Yeah.
Yeah, I know he was 60-ish maybe, I think.
68, I believe. Yeah.
Oh, 68, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's a guy though that's a little under the radar, and folks, if they're not aware of him, should definitely seek out his catalog. And also, he did so many amazing sessions too with a lot of the greats.
Yeah, he did. He was an incredible drummer, I'm telling you. Ooh. And when you sit right there in front of him and feel the power that he could play with, but yet the precision as well and the finesse. I mean, he just had a way of, you know, integrating power and finesse at the same time. It was something to behold.
Hmm. So you were born in Denver or you were born overseas?
No, I actually was born in Denver, but about less than 2 years later, my father got shipped over to Europe, and so that's where I went.
So what could you tell people about the music scene in Denver? Because what I know, I mean, I've been there a number of times, but and on my bucket list for sure is going to Red Rocks one of these days. But Uh, I know that they've had some funk through there, and and places like the Caribou Ranch, have had some pretty cool recordings made by Earth, Wind and Fire and people like that. So, what can you
Right.
say about that, area of the country in terms of, its rhythmic music and that influence?
Well, I think like any major city, Denver's got a lot of good musicians here, very talented people. Uh, Scott, but I think you will agree, the music environment has went through changes. Uh, I mean, there was a time when there were clubs thriving all over the city and bands could work, very regularly and consistently. And then there was a time when things slowed down. Then some things picked up again. And then, especially when COVID hit around here, things slowed down quite a bit. So the music scene right now in Denver, I mean, there still is one here. A lot of bands are still trying to find as many places to play as they can. Many of them are still putting out a lot of original music, as so many artists are around the world. Uh, but currently at the moment, the Denver music scene is, I think it's stifled a little bit, but it's because of everything going on, though. I think it's just how the world has got more problems and there's more social issues to kind of deal with, and you know there's the economics obviously is affecting things because a lot of popular clubs have closed down now. So from what I can observe, there's a lot of scrambling to play regularly and a whole lot, but there still is an active scene here. I will just say, Scott, that it's not thriving like it was, you know, 8, 9 years ago or so, but there's still an active scene here. And so I think everybody's just trying to hang on and just do what they can.
Well, I do like the Motet. That's one of the only local bands I know that's funky in that area.
Yeah, yeah, there's a couple of cover bands that are pretty funky here. Uh, but the cover thing, you're playing other people's music, which that's fine. I mean, that cover bands serve their purpose. But as far as original bands that are really coming out with some strong funk, uh, as far as what I'm aware of, probably the Motet would probably be the best representation of some good strong funk based here in the Denver metro area.
What was the genesis that led to you, starting a funk above the rest? Did you have any radio experience before that? And tell that
No, I
story.
did not. And so let me share that story with you. When I was, traveling as a drummer to different cities with different groups or whatever, uh, let me say this now. Let me back up and say this first. I've always been a person that's been outside the box. Let me start off with that. My father was very, very influential on me. He was a good father. He was a good man. Uh, he loved his kids, protected them, taught them, encouraged them, corrected them when they needed. I mean, I just had a good father. And one of the things that my father taught me from the time I was a little kid was not to follow the crowd. He says, Skip, as you grow up, you forge your own path in life. He said, no, don't get me wrong, grow up to be a decent person as best as you can, but don't follow the crowd. My father's philosophy was this: if you follow the crowd, when you get there, it's crowded. And he was preaching that to me from the time I was 5 years old. So as I started growing up, and my musical interests continued to develop and diversify, whenever I would go to the record store, Scott, not only did I buy the hit, groups that were out, but I was always looking for the music that nobody had. Always looking for the music that nobody had. So I would repeatedly go over to the bin. This is back, of course, when you could buy albums. I would go to a certain bin where the bands were not known, and I would just, I would thumb through them and scroll through them. And if I saw an album cover that just caught my interest, I don't care what the group was, I didn't care what the type of music, I would just buy it and just see what's on it. And many times I would go, man, this is some good stuff, but nobody knows it. Nobody knows it because it's not played on the radio. It doesn't have a big hit, not getting major marketing promotion from the label. So I was always looking for the music that everybody else did not have. So with that in mind, when I started performing and traveling to shows, whenever we were in a vehicle or a mode of transportation that had a radio, when they turned the radio on, I started to notice that just everything just sounded the same. You know, everything. It was the same songs, city after city, station after station. It just played the same songs. And I started getting tired of that after a while. Well, then I started recording, uh, tracks with independent artists. And me being the ambitious person that I am, I would be the one that would try to go to radio stations to see if we could get airplay for the recordings that I was a part of. Well, all the major networks just wouldn't give me the time of day. You would get a few local radio stations, community radio stations, smaller stations, some AM stations that might give you a play here and there, but you couldn't get any attention from the major mainstream networks. So as all of this is all happening around the same time, I thought to myself, man, you know what? I'm getting bored with radio. I'm just getting bored with it. And I said, if I ever was on a radio, I would do this, I would do that, I would do this, I would do that. So while we'd be traveling, I would be fantasizing about a radio format that I would do. And included in that format would be, I'm going to play the music of independent artists because I'm getting all this independent music that I'm meeting people along my travels. And, I go to places and watch bands perform and they got some good stuff out. And I thought, man, if I had a radio show, I'd be playing these guys' music, So that was around 1996 that the idea started, it was in its infant stages, you might say. So as we progressed to the year 2004, I decided to retire from drumming in 2003. I was just getting tired of it, and I just wanted to change. And so, but that radio idea was still in the front of my mind. And I really started trying to put together a format and try to develop a strategy. How can I get a radio station to possibly give me an opportunity to try this concept out? Now, let me say this too, Scott. At that time, in the early 2000s here in Denver, there really were no exclusive R&B radio stations. So you were not able to hear the old school stuff. And, some of the other stations with top 40 stations, adult contemporary, would play some R&B here and there, but there was not a station that was exclusively dedicated to that. So there was a huge void here. So what happened was two major commercial radio stations here in town. I got a hold of the program directors and asked them, could I share a concept that I have for a radio show and see if they would consider it, because on the weekends they were doing some specialty shows or alternative type shows that veered slightly away from their main format. I thought, well, maybe they'll let me, give it a shot. So I spoke to two radio programmers and they respectfully told me, you know what, Skip, there's no audience for what you want to do. You won't be able to market that here in Denver. And basically, we just don't see it working. And I said to myself, you jokers don't know what you're talking about, because these are corporate people. I said, you jokers don't know what you're talking about. So that was towards the latter part of 2004. So, I'm still just into other things. And there was a local, and the station is still here, there's a local jazz station that started also doing some specialty shows. At least I became familiar with it because a friend of mine said, Skip, you need to listen to the station. Man, they're doing some specialty shows on the weekend. Maybe you should go down there and ask them about your show. It's a close friend of mine. His name is Charles Dotson. And I thought, well, okay, I'll do that. So I went down and got a hold of the music director and asked him if I could have a meeting with him. And he said, sure. So keep in mind, this was a community nonprofit radio station. So he said, sure, come on down and tell us what your idea is. So when I explained the idea to him, he was like, "That's a good concept." He says, "I think that could work." He says, "But I got to get the program director involved and the general manager of the station involved." So I had meetings with all three of them. I explained the concept to them, and they said, "Yeah." They said, "Yeah, we'll give you a shot at it. You know it." So at that time, I told them the show's going to be called A Funk Above the Rest. And they said to me, well, the program director says, "Oh, so does that mean you're going to be playing a lot of James Brown and Parliament Funkadelic?" I said, "Listen, there's a whole lot more music out there than just those two." I said, "My format is going to be pretty expensive." I said, "I'm going to play some stuff that you'll never hear anywhere else but on A Funk Above the Rest." He said, "That's fine. That's fine." So what happened, Scott, was that was around 2005, around September or so, when I finally had these meetings with all of them. So they informed me that they had a slot for me starting in 2006 at 11 o'clock. And so they said, "We'll give you from 11 to 12 on Saturday night, starting the first Saturday in January of 2006. And I said, "You only gonna let me go to 12? I said, "Man, I'm gonna just be getting my groove on then." And they said, "Well, you can go a couple more hours or as long as you want. You just have to start at 11 o'clock." And I said, "That's fine." And so the program director, he made a comment to me, he said, "Skip," he said, "I'm gonna tell you something now." He said, "It's gonna take you a while to grow an audience, and particularly for two reasons, because you're going to be coming on at 11 o'clock, which is pretty late on a Saturday night." He says, "And so your people either are going to be in bed or they're going to be out at the clubs." He said, "So it's going to take you a while to develop an audience." Well, I was told by one of the receptionists that manned the phones, within 3 months, she said the phone was constantly ringing off the hook telling me people are loving this show. They're loving this show. So that was how A Funk Above the Rest got started. What I would do, Scott, is because again, my primary focus was to support independent artists. So what I would do back at that time when I first started the show, CD Baby was very active, accepting CDs from artists from around the world. So I would always go to their new release section, and I'd go to the R&B section, and if I found a song or an artist that I liked what they were doing, I would email them and tell them, "Hey, listen, I've got a show here in America, and I'm on the #1 jazz station," which at the time it was. And if you send me some CDs, of your release, I'll give you some airplay. I need 3 CDs. I need one for my personal collection. I need one for the station's library, and I need one to give away on the air. And I would get all these CDs coming in, and I would always give them away on the air by creating contests, trivia questions, and just different things. But it became a very popular part of the show because I was always giving away these CDs. And I incorporated these CDs into a segment called Funk It or Junk It, meaning, should I keep this song or should we throw it away? And people just thrive calling in going, "You can funk that, you can funk that." And then every once in a while I say, "Oh, you need to junk that." And but most of the time people like the song. So, Scott, I created an environment that I engaged myself with my audience. I allowed people to call me, tell me what they were thinking. I would sometimes put them on the air. And the show just took off because of that.
Wow. Well, credit to you for, just doing the grassroots thing, and making it happen. You weren't going to be denied, it sounds like to me.
Yeah, and let me mention this real quickly. So after about a year or so of doing the show, on this was a terrestrial station. I would get phone calls from some of my, listeners going, "You need to syndicate this show. You need to syndicate this show." And I thought, at the time, I didn't have a clue how to syndicate. I mean, I knew what syndication meant, but I don't know how to do it. So I started doing some research about it, and I actually got a hold of a company that said they could help me syndicate the show. But the amount of money that they wanted to do that, I didn't have. So I called up a friend of mine who at the time was vice president of a a local TV network. And I just said, "All right," I said, "Man, this syndication stuff, I'm getting a lot of suggestions to syndicate the show, but you know, I really don't know how to go about doing it. And this company I called, they want too much money. And so he goes, Skip, because I'll tell you what I'll do. He says, you can stream your show from your radio station. He said, send me the link, the streaming link, your logo and everything. I'm gonna put a link on our TV station's website that people can tune in and listen to your show from our website. He says, you're syndicated, I said, okay. And so from that point on, I started contacting other radio stations, particularly internet. Because at that time internet radio was starting to happen. So I would contact these different internet radio stations. Go, hey, I've got a show I'd like to send to you, and I don't want anything for it. Just play it. I don't care if you've got 5 listeners or 50. Just put it on there, and most of the stations would take the show. They said, yeah, we'll take it. We'll take it. And so it just continued to grow like that. And then one of my close friends said to me, he said, Skip, you're wasting your time trying to syndicate on these internet stations. You know what? Well, today he looks at me and goes, whoa. He said, it's a good thing you didn't listen to me. I said, no, I wasn't going to listen to you. So those are the early beginnings of Funk Above the Rest.
I understand though, and to be expected, you did have some initial hiccups like on some early shows because you had to kind of get used to, operating the equipment and that kind of thing. So how much time did it take before you really started to feel comfortable?
You mean as far as operating the equipment? It took me
Yeah.
about 2 months to where I was really comfortable with it. Because at that time, Scott, I uploaded CDs onto a CD player. Now I don't. I mean, obviously it's MP3s and WAV files, but at that time, it was hard copy CDs. So I had to get used to, loading up. They had 3 discs, 3 players that you could put CDs in, and I had to operate the board by myself because there was no engineer to operate the board. So they taught us how to do all that. So, I'm putting in the CDs and fading up and fading down and turning on this song, turning off that song. It took me a couple of months to get completely comfortable with it.
Yeah, because I ran a mobile disc jockey company in the 80s for about 15 years. And so did a lot of, sound work and um, have an idea what it's like. And I did some radio stuff too, mostly like interning, but I did work on some syndicated shows back when you had to actually, razor cut all the tape together and that kind of thing and use the cart machines and, so I have a feel and appreciation of those early experiences that you must have had.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
But Scott, and I know you know this, but I mean, I just grew to love it. I would come in every Saturday night just pumped to do my show. And I've been this coming January in 2025 will be 17 years, and I'm still pumped to do it. Of course, I record everything at home digitally now, but I still enjoy doing the show because I get so much music sent to me from all over the world. And Scott, let me throw this in real quick. Uh, when I started a Funk Above the Rest, I did not focus on or concentrate trying to really develop a following locally. I tried to become more known outside of my, geographic area. So that's why I spent a lot of time looking up artists that were outside of America because I knew promoting them, they would promote me, which is what they did. These different artists that were outside of America, they would put on their websites and on their social media sites, hey, my song is going to be played on the Funk Above the Rest in America, and tune in and tune in and tune in. And I was told that I had a lot of streaming traffic back then because I was always, reaching out to artists that were outside of America. And I had a friend asked me one time, why did you do that? And so, Scott, I'm gonna put it this way. I said, you know, I'm familiar with some scriptures. I said, in the scriptures, Jesus made a comment that a prophet is not honored in his hometown. I said, Jesus could go out and perform miracles, but in his hometown of Nazareth, it's just Jesus. What's the big deal? But outside of his hometown, people look forward to everything that he did for them. So I took that principle and said, I'm going to apply that to reaching the people outside of my area. You know what? I mean, eventually people did get to know me, but I pursued getting known outside of America first, and then it started to filter back.
Well, that doesn't surprise me at all, just knowing how in the 90s and early 2000s, America had forsaken like funk music so much and like classic, R&B and kicked it to the curb and just, it was a whole corporate thing that was whitewashing it that way. And it was a damn shame. But overseas, they still appreciated it in many circles and many countries, and they, uh, you know, worshipped it in some cases. So,
Yeah,
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 they weren't as fickle as Americans that way.
yeah, yeah. And Scott, and I mean, you're right. I mean, and it's that way even today. I've always felt and known there's a greater appreciation for music in general in European countries than it is in America. It's I guess because there's so many options here, maybe that's part of it. Whereas, for me as a kid growing up, Scott, music really touched me. I was affected by it. I mean, when I would hear, positive lyrics in a song, I would try to aspire to that. You know what? I stayed away from all the negative stuff. I don't care for the ugly side of music, however you want to describe that. But I've always pursued the positive side of things. And, I want people when they listen to my show to walk away with a good feeling. And I've been told for years that that's the case. So yeah, they still appreciate funk over there in Europe.
Yeah, yeah, bless them. Um,
Yeah.
well, so over how much time did you start to, kind of create some of the production elements that you use in the show today, where you have like little vignettes and the bumpers and things like that?
Uh, I started once I started getting the show syndicated on a bunch of internet stations. Scott, here's what would happen. A lot of the smaller internet stations at the time, and a lot of internet stations still do this today. Matter of fact, a lot of commercial mainstream stations are doing this now, but they would just play music automatically. You know how it is? They just play, there's no live personalities much anymore. They would just program music into, their station and just let it play. So
Automated, yeah.
yeah, it's right, right. So a lot of program directors would tell me when they would get my show, because I would speak and I would talk, they said they would get more listeners because the human element was in the show. Whereas all this automated music, the human element is gone, except for the commercials and whatever buffer they throw in. So, you know, again, to me, I want the show to have some entertainment value, even though you can't visually see me, but I want there to be some entertainment value. So I just started, probably after about a year of doing the internet, programming shows for the internet. I just started, I would ask different people to record a few drops for me and say this and that, and I would just insert them, into the show just to give it a different dynamic, and a different voice and a different personality. And it just kept growing and it kept growing. And then when I was at the commercial uh, community radio station, the jazz station, I had all these ideas putting skits together, and the engineers down there would love work with me on it because they go, you're the only one that's doing this down here. Everybody just comes in and just does their show, but you come in with skits, you've got sayings, you've got little scripts you want to insert. So basically, Scott, that came about because I want the show to have a measure of entertainment value to it, not just listen to a song and that's it. And let me say this too, Scott. All of my shows, they're all well thought out. I don't do any show randomly. I don't just throw music in there just for the sake of it. Every show that I do, the order of the songs, the selection of the songs, all of it is deliberately placed where it's at. because I want there to be dynamics in the show. I don't want it to have a whitewash sound because sometimes I don't listen to the radio much, but when I do, it's the sound, the sonic sound, the fidelity, everything starts to sound the same. You know what? I want there to be dynamics in my show. That's why there's such a mixture of old stuff, new stuff, stuff that's slow funk, stuff that's fast funk. There's instrumentals in there. There's songs that have a heavy message in them. Then there's songs that just talk about partying. I mean, I try to mix it up and diversify it. But when it's all said and done, I want it to have some entertainment aspect to it.
Yeah, and what I really appreciate also, besides that, Skip, is you'll take the effort to, help educate about the music too, because you'll, play something maybe newer and something older, something by an artist that's on their own that was with a group, and you'll kind of explain how that ties together. Because I think it's so important, as we try to preserve these legacies of these great artists, to educate in that way.
Wow, Scott, you've listened to the show, huh? I
Hey, I'm
appreciate
a lifelong Funketeer, brother.
that. I appreciate that. I really do. Yeah, I'm glad you get it. And a lot of my listeners will say, Skip, we get it. We see and hear exactly where you're coming from. Because Scott, it's not for everybody, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. But for those who do get it, I appreciate it.
Now, how and when did the Funktologist come to be? The moniker.
You know what, Scott? I never meant for that to stick. What happened was one time I was doing some reading, and it was about archaeological. Uh, they were digging in ruins, and they were finding all these old artifacts. And so I was doing some reading on that, and I just said to myself, and this was before I started the show, but I said to myself, you know what? If I ever do this radio show that I got an idea for, I'm gonna go digging for some of the lost funk gems that you just don't hear anymore. They're in rare albums, they're rare cuts. I'm gonna go digging for that stuff, you know it. And so I thought, well, if they're an archaeologist and they're digging for all these artifacts in these ruins, man, what if I'm going to be digging for old music? I guess that would make me a funktologist. so, so I'm thinking like that. So the first night that I'm on the air, Scott, this is January in 2006, the first Saturday of the month, and I go on the air and I said, yeah, I'm going to be like a funktologist. I'm going to be digging up some old funk, some stuff that y'all either forgot about or you've never heard of before. And before the night was over, they called up and said, yeah, you're the funktologist, you're the funktologist. And so it just stuck. I never meant for it to stick, but it did. So that's it.
Well, there's a lot of Egyptology and that kind of thing that runs through a lot of the music artists too, with Earth, Wind and Fire and just
Yeah,
the Trombipulation by Parliament and just the different covers and the different themes. So it's kind of part of the music as well,
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Um,
Well, it's definitely stuck now, Scott. I mean, I'm stuck with it. And I'm okay with that. I truly am because it's just another, as far as I'm concerned, it's just another point to laugh at and poke fun at and see some humor in it.
yeah. But people got to get it right. It's Funktologist, not Funkologist. You got
Right,
to,
it is
yeah,
ontologist, yeah.
yeah.
Some of the people that will do radio draws for me will say funkologist, but I'm okay with that. I'm okay with it because sometimes when people see the spelling, they don't realize they need to emphasize the T in there, you know what? And what made me say as opposed to funkology or funkologist, when I looked up, both of the words, it said that ology, of course, is just the study of something. But a gist is a person who shares it and spreads the information. So that's why I put it as funktologist as opposed to funkologist, because a funkologist is just going to study the funk. A tologist is going to share and spread the funk. So that's what I discovered from my research.
There you have reason to the rhyme right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Skip, what would you say looking back are a couple of the highs or just unforgettable experiences you've had in this journey with the show?
Uh, well, the highs, I've just met so many people along the way. And you know what, Scott? It's opened up more doors than I ever would have imagined. When I first started the show, it was strictly just to spend a couple hours just playing some music that I felt very positive that people would enjoy. Uh, I had no idea it was going to turn into what it has. I mean, it has led to me meeting more, well, famous people. Uh, I branched off in doing some promotion from it. Although, there were a few mishaps that happened along the way with that, but it's opened the doors to television programs, TV, yeah, television and TV programs. It's opened the door to me being in commercials. I've done a few voiceovers. Uh, you know, I'm invited to a lot of special events and things to be a part of. I get a lot of requests to review music. And I get a lot of music sent to me that's got nothing to do with funk. I mean, every genre of music gets sent to me, and people will just ask me, well, just give us your feedback on it. Would you write a review on this? So, I mean, in general, those are the highlights. If there was anything in specific that I would probably like rise to the top, I mean, all of it has been good, but I think one of the highlights is when an associate and myself, we promoted a concert with Frankie Beverly here back in 2012. And for me personally, it was just nice. It was just nice to meet him and sit down and chat with him for a while and just, you know, get to know the man behind the music, and as you know, he's recently, fell asleep in death here, but meeting him and sitting down and chatting with him for a little bit is one of the highlights of being a part of this a funk above the rest atmosphere environment.
Are you a person that collects memorabilia? Do you get things signed or have other things like that?
Not a whole lot. No, no, I really can't say that I've never been one crazy about getting autographs and, collecting a whole lot of memorabilia. Honestly, I don't have much of that. I have to be honest, I don't.
How big is your music collection?
Cool. You know what, Scott? I don't know if I can put a number on it. I mean, I still have a lot of old albums from back in the day. I call it the day. Even when I'm on the air, that's what I say, because nowadays, when you talk to somebody, it even goes back to the 2000s, they go back in the day. And then you talk to people, go to the 90s, and that's their back in the day. Well, my back in the day is 60s and 70s, so I call it the day. So, yeah, yeah.
Each day equals like 20 years or so. Each day is like a generation.
At least for me, it is. Yeah, for me, it is. Yeah.
The other aspect of that education too, I think, is people, forever they've given funk short shrift, not having its own genre category in so many ways and overlooked for the Hall of Fame and things at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and things like that. But its influence is in so many different other genres. And it's so far reaching, in its overall influence and the culture, uh, and style and attitude. And so I think that you also go after that too in what you do and help, open eyes to the importance of funk overall.
Yeah. Well, Scott, and to second what you just said, there is no doubt that funk has had a major influence on so many artists, regardless of the genres that they may perform in. I have talked to people through the years, country artists, obviously jazz artists, blues artists, rock artists. They've all, in some way, shape, or form, mentioned some influence of funk, either to a greater or lesser degree. But there's been some influence there. It's undeniable. It's undeniable. And I think that's one of the unfortunate aspects of how mainstream media controls things. It's like, you know, I don't want to get into it necessarily being a racial issue, but you know, there just sometimes seems to be this effort to downplay certain influences from certain groups of people. I'll put it that way, you know it. But hey, it is what it is. That's why Funk Above the Rest is out there because as long as I'm able to and my circumstances allow, I'm going to keep it out there. And let me say this too, Scott. The name of Funk Above the Rest can a little bit be misleading because I know when people hear that title, they think all it means is that it's going to be constant, straight up funk, but that's not what it means. A funk above the rest simply means I'm just going to go above and beyond what's expected in my musical format. You know, I'm going to go above and beyond that because again, the program director many years ago telling me, "Oh, so you're going to play a lot of James Brown and call him Funkadelic?" Well, there's a whole lot more music out there than that. You know what? And Scott, I get music sent to me from all over the world. Everybody doing their version of funk. It's their version, but I appreciate that they all now realize that I'm an outlet for their brand of R&B, their brand of funk. So that's pretty much what the name means. That I'm going to go above and beyond just the general format of just funk in itself, but my playlist is going to be pretty expansive.
Yeah, we are a global ambassador for the funk.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. You put it well. Yep.
I've been trying to get some more exposure through what I can do too for some of those artists, that are overseas and have the funk that are loyal to the funk. Like you'll see when you watch future upcoming shows, but I recently had on, one from Romania and one from France, and their music's legit and their love for it is totally legit.
Oh yeah, no
Yeah.
question. You know what, Scott? I'm gonna go on record here on your show and say something that might might upset some people, but I don't care. Uh, in the current musical climate that we're in, especially the R&B funk genre, compared to the music that I'm getting from people outside of America and groups inside of America, the bands and artists outside of America are producing some of the funkier stuff that I've recently heard than bands in America. And yet funk originated here, but there are groups outside of America that have taken it and they are throwing it down. They are throwing it down. So if that upsets somebody, live with it.
Hey, man, they're kind of taking like what the English did with the blues, back in the 60s.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know what, Scott, maybe, I shouldn't say maybe, but off the record, off the air and so forth, I'll share with you, a lot of artists that I've got their stuff from outside of America and, you're free to do with it what you want. Because I've got a ton of it. I mean, I've shared the stage with a lot of artists, and I've got to meet a lot of people. But for me, Scott, meeting Buddy Miles was a highlight of my overall music career. Uh, as a drummer growing up, I played a lot to Buddy's music because I just liked him, even when he was with Hendrix. But he's got a lot of solo music out. And see, Scott, when I was a drummer, I was a singing drummer, so I could do lead singing while I was drumming. And as people would be around me, where'd you learn how to sing and play like that? And I go, I used to listen to Buddy Miles records, and as a teenager in my room, and I'd be playing to all of his records, and I'd be singing right along with him. So, you know, it was kind of funny. I always followed Buddy's career, And what happened, Scott? One day he came here to Colorado to do a performance, and it's a little club up in the mountains called the Little Bear. It's up in Evergreen, Colorado. And so I thought, oh, I'm going to go see Buddy. Now I never met him at this point. I'm going to go up here and see Buddy. So I went up earlier, and when I walked into the club, he actually was sitting at a table selling CDs and signing autographs and stuff. So, I waited my turn to speak to him. And when I went up to his table, I said, hey, Buddy, I said, first of all, I'm Skip. And I said, I owe you a lot of money. And he looked at me and said, what are you talking about? And I said, man, you gave me drum lessons when I was a teenager. I said, I played the all your records and sang along with them. I said, I learned how to drum and sing because I listened to all your records. And so he says, okay, well, give me my money. So we had a laugh out of that. But he said, so you still acting as a drummer? I said, of course I am. He says, well, I tell you what, he says, you want to come sit up and jam with me tonight? And I said, are you serious? He said, yeah, I'm serious. And he said, I tell you what, he says, I'm going to do 45 minutes behind the drums. He says, in the next 45 minutes of the show, why don't you come up and play with me? He says, you said you know my music. I said, I know all your stuff. So he mentioned the different songs he was going to play. I said, buddy, I know all those songs. So sure enough, 45 minutes into his set, he called me up on stage, and I played the drums on his set. And I mean, it just went well. Me and the band, we just connected and clicked. And after that, he says, can you travel? And I said, yeah, I'd like you to come do more shows with me. So I did more shows with him like that. But here's what I'm getting at, Scott. To watch the audience respond to him, it was just something to watch because everybody knew he had been with Jimi Hendrix. And I think everybody just had this feeling like this is as close to Hendrix as we're going to get is with Buddy. So to watch audiences just fall in love with him because of his connection to Jimmy, I admired him every time I played with him. I would just sit there and look at the people and go, wow, that Hendrix association meant a lot to people, and he used it to his benefit. He used it to his benefit. So, but he was a nice guy. He was a nice guy, just easygoing, treated everybody well. I mean, just yeah. Meeting Buddy Miles, the biggest highlight in my career, and playing with him as well.
From what I've heard, he didn't see, at least in his later years, he didn't seem to have much ego. I mean, he was just open, looking to help how he could. And because I had
Yeah.
Lance Lopez, a blues guitar player, great player, on the show, and Buddy kind of mentored him, and
Yeah.
so and I don't think people realize. I mean, he was kind of a musical genius, I mean,
Yeah, he was.
he could
He
play
could play
some
every
killer
instrument.
guitar too. I mean,
Yeah, he could play just about every instrument. I mean, he was something else, man. Matter of fact, on my show last Friday, I played "Power of Love" from Jimi Hendrix from the band The Gypsies. I played it on my show, and I hadn't listened to the song in a while. And I'm sitting there listening to it, and I'm going, man, I remember when I'd sit in my room and just, you know. As a matter of fact, Scott, the last concert he did before he died was here in Denver.
wow.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So yeah, he was all the above. A nice guy, no ego, and just great to be around.
Yeah. Also lost him a little too soon, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank goodness for those old records because I still have them.
And those memories you just shared, for sure.
Yeah.
Um, so what other projects do you have going that maybe you want to mention or share with the folks?
Well, right now I've got 2 TV shows on a streaming network called Sparks TV. I've got a TV show called Video Vibes, the Eclectic Side, and I just introduced videos from different artists from all genres. Because you know what, Scott, I want people to know there's more to me than just the funk. So this show is called Video Vibes, the Eclectic Side. And I just play different videos from all different genres of music on that show. Then I have another show called Skip's Artist Showcase. And I do what you're doing. I interview different artists on that particular show. So currently I'm busy with that. It's been going on for a little over a year now. So I've got a couple more episodes in the can that need to get edited, and I'm setting up new episodes as well. So in addition to the radio stuff, that's what I'm currently doing.
I got to ask you, if you had to desert island it, what would be your top 5 funk albums?
Oh, well, number one is James Brown, Live at the Apollo, Volume 2. Just, I can never get enough of that, you know. So that's definitely number one on the list. Probably number two on the list would be Funkadelic's Maggot Brain, because my favorite Funkadelic song, Super Stupid, is on that list, you know. And then I gotta go to the Ohio Players, their album Pain. Man, I love that song Pain, just love that song Pain. Then next on the list would be Mandrill, Composite Truth with Fence Walk. Man, just love that stuff. And then my fifth album, the Commodores put out a live album. I think it's 1977 or 78. It's a double live album. Just a great album. So I'll throw that in as number 5 as far as my funk stuff.
All right. And that's one that has Too Hot to Trot on it also. So you get a studio cut as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you ever get to see them back then?
Oh, yes, several times.
Yeah.
Several times. Scott, let me tell you this real quickly. All the major acts from the 60s, and 70s, I saw them all, rock and R&B. I mean, I would go to certain rock concerts and I think I'd be the only black guy there.
I was on the other side of that. I was the only white guy at funk concerts, believe me.
So you can relate to what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, I've been to all these concerts when I was a youngster, all of them. Black, white, it didn't matter to me. I went to them all because, Scott, I love music. I just enjoy music, I just decided to focus on the phone because, yeah, it's probably my first love, but I like music in general.
Yeah. Well, in the same year back then, I was seeing, Ohio Players and Aerosmith, and,
Right. Yeah,
so
I've seen Aerosmith. I've seen the Southern bands, the Outlaws and Molly Hatchet. I mean, I've seen them all, Scott. Alice Cooper. I mean, Edgar Winter, Rick Derringer. I mean, I saw all those groups back then. All of them.
mostly in Denver.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Mostly here in Denver. Yep.
Yeah. Mostly at the big arena or at small venues too.
Well, both. Most of them are big arenas. McNichols Arena, which is gone now, they tore it down, but that was a big concert venue. And also the Denver Coliseum, which is still here. So you would either see the big bands at McNichols Arena or the Denver Coliseum.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, I think we're nearing the end here. So why don't you let everybody know where and when they can listen to your show?
I think the best thing that I can recommend is just to go to my website, funkabove-the-rest.com, because all the shows and the stations that are carrying it are listed there. So that's really the best thing to do because they play them at different days, at different times, different hours, so to speak. So that's what I recommend. Just go to the website of funkabove-the-rest.com.
And so are most people listening live or after it's been recorded?
Most of it is pre-recorded, but I do a live show here for a terrestrial station called KGNU. And I do that show the first Friday of each month. It's a show called Dusty Grooves, but it's still my show as far as the music that I play. So it's still a Funk Above the Rest. It just has a different name with this different station. And I appreciate that, Scott. I've got a terrestrial presence locally, but I've also got an international presence digitally. So I've got the best of both worlds.
Nice. Well, congratulations on all you've accomplished with that, Skip. And thank you so much for keeping the funk alive for everybody and for sharing your story with us today.
Well, Scott, thank you so much for having me and being a fellow Funketeer.